Causation. Follow along with your paper copy of the writing structure or with the digital copy on screen. If there is no causation issue in the scenario, e.g., it says that D operated on V, which resulted in a harm/death, continue with paragraph 2 below. After that, go to paragraph 12. Insert the defendant's name caused in fact the harm/death of, insert the victim's name as, but for, insert what the defendant did and or did not do, insert victim's name, would not have died, white. Insert the defendant's name also caused, in law, the harm/death of, insert the victim's name, as they were the substantial and operating cause of the harm/death. If there is a causation issue in the scenario, as there is a potential break in the chain because of an act of the victim, an act of a third party, inadequate medical treatment, or the thin skull rule, continue from paragraph 4 onwards. In deciding if, insert the defendant's name, caused the harm/death of, insert the victim's name, there are two tests. Firstly, factual causation is used to decide if the harm/death would have happened but for the defendant's guilty act, white. But for, insert the defendant's name, and then state what they did and or did not do, insert the victim's name, would not have died. Second, legal causation needs to be satisfied. Insert the defendant's name needs to be the substantial and operating cause of, insert the victim's name, harm/death. However, they do not have to be the only cause. Substantial cause requires the defendant's role to be more than minimal. In Kimsey, this was said to be more than a slight or trifling link. Insert the defendant's name and explain what the defendant did/did not do and how this was substantial, as it was an important/the main/the only reason for the harm/death of the victim. If there is another person who played a role in the events, mention this, but say that this does not matter as the defendant is still a substantial cause. Next, insert the defendant's name needs to be the operating cause of the harm/death of, insert the victim's name. This means their conduct was a significant cause. There must be no breaks in the chain of causation because of a new intervening act. Select from the following. More than one may apply depending on the scenario. Include the following if there was an act of the victim after the act/omission of the defendant. Here, there was an act of the victim which could be said to have broken the chain of causation between, insert the defendant's name, and insert the victim's name. However, this will only break the chain of causation if it is not reasonably foreseeable. Roberts. Apply. State what the victim did and whether or not this is reasonably foreseeable in light of what the defendant did to them. Include the following if there was an act of a third party after the act/omission of the defendant. Here, there was an act of a third party which could be said to have broken the chain of causation between, insert the defendant's name, and insert the victim's name. However, this will only break the chain of causation if it is not reasonably foreseeable. Rafferty. Apply. State what the third party did and whether or not this is reasonably foreseeable in light of what the defendant did to the victim. Include the following if there was poor quality medical treatment after the act/omission of the defendant. Inadequate medical treatment may have broken the chain of causation. Poor medical treatment does not normally break the chain of causation unless it was so independent of the defendant's act and in itself so potent that it made the defendant's act insignificant. Cheshire. Apply. State what the medical treatment was and why this was or wasn't inadequate enough to break the chain of causation. If this was a failure to treat a patient, for example, they were just sent home, then it is not a positive act in medical care, so cannot break the chain of causation. If the victim has an injury that is not yet healed, the chain of causation will not be broken by the inadequate medical treatment as the defendant's act is still an operating cause. Include the following if the victim has anything that makes them vulnerable, for example, an allergy, a medical condition, a religious belief, a fear of or laziness, in attitude to medical treatment, etc. However, insert the victim's name had a vulnerability because, state what this was. According to the thin skull rule, if such a vulnerability makes the victim more susceptible to harm/death, this will not break the chain of causation. even if the defendant was unaware of this and could not foresee the consequence. This means the defendant has to take the victim as he finds them. Allow. Apply. State that this vulnerability therefore makes no difference and that the chain of causation is unbroken. Therefore, the defendant did/did not cause the harm/death of the victim.